The video games industry seems to be entering a transitionary phase as companies try to reconcile their past behaviours and attitudes with their future ambitions to enter the monopolistic metaverse future that Microsoft and Sony and Nintendo and the rest of them envision for all of us gamers. And adaptations and transmedia seem to be one of the tactics that they're employing to get us there. Hi, I'm Rob, and welcome to Gossip News. Now, we're going to kick off with one of those skeletons in the closet stories, and we're not going to go with Ubisoft or EA or any of the other companies like that. We're going to go with Team 17 this time. Now, Team 17 have recently been in the news with their Meta Worms NFT fiasco, where they announced it and then quickly backtracked on it because everybody literally pushed back on it. Their indie developers who they've signed, a bunch of them said they were never going to work with Team 17 again. Yada, yada, yada. Now, in the follow-up to that, Eurogamer went back to Team 17 and spoke to a number of employees under condition of anonymity to find out more about the NFT fiasco and just basically what was going on at Team 17. And it turns out that, well, a lot was going on. Eurogamer spoke to over a dozen employees, past and present, from Team 17's Wakefield and Nottingham sites, and they were all stunned at how the upper management at Team 17 had approached the whole NFT fiasco. Now, these employees have also gone on to confirm that the company's been shedding team members who are fed up with the low salaries, long hours, and concerns around HR and upper management not actually understanding what the staff wants or needs. The whole thing seems to highlight how senior management and executives at Team 17 seem to be wildly out of touch with the developers that they have on board, with their own staff, and with the people who buy their games. Now, Eurogamer laid out the concerns raised in the report to Team 17, and they invited the company to respond. A spokesperson provided them with a statement which basically said that Team 17 take their responsibilities to their staff very seriously, that Team 17 constantly reviewed their internal policies and practices, and that they would be engaging with their employees in order to find ways that they could improve on their communication and other aspects like that. Following that, Team 17's CEO, Michael Patterson, had a company-wide meeting last Friday, and he gave a lengthy response and announced an immediate peer review for all staff in the company's QA department. Now, the statement itself, I'm not going to go over. I will link it in the description below for anyone that wants to read it. It seems like, on the surface at least, Patterson has hit all the right notes with Team 17 employees. They seem to be really excited about the changes that are being suggested. We will see. We've heard a lot of these things before, only to see no change at all. Look at Ubisoft, for example. It was only the other day that the employee group at Ubisoft actually published updates on their Twitter feed, highlighting that the company has made almost no changes, even though they promised to make changes immediately, and that senior executives still didn't understand what staff were talking about and weren't even listening. Like I said, we've heard all the platitudes before. Let's see actions, not words. Speaking of skeevy companies, Nintendo. Now, in an age where video games preservation is one of the topics that people like to discuss and debate over, and people, even at the level of Phil Spencer, have weighed in on the idea of video games preservation and said, look, it's really important we understand where video games come from, what their history is, how they've evolved, that sort of thing. In the midst of all that, you have Nintendo, who normally we don't criticize them for going off into the corner and doing their own thing, and Nintendo fans, we don't really criticize for their tribalism or anything like that. We generally just leave them off to one side, out of sight, out of mind. But on this occasion, I think Nintendo really, really, really needs to understand that what they're doing is effectively shooting themselves in the foot. Now, Nintendo have decided that in March 2023, they're going to be closing their eShop for 3DS and Wii U purchases. That means that users will no longer be able to purchase digital games for either of those consoles from March 2023. Which is fine. We've seen announcements like this from Nintendo before. Sony have announced the closure of the PS3 store and the PSP store. It's just something that happens as video games evolve and consoles evolve and things like that. I can understand the financial side of it. What I don't understand is the video games preservation side of it and the non-existence of it where Nintendo is concerned. And I also don't understand why Nintendo fans actually don't pressure the company into changing or reversing their decision, like a lot of people did with Sony. Makes no sense to me that you're also accepting of Nintendo's decisions. It's like you've all been hypnotized. Anyway, whatever the case may be, some very smart people have run the numbers and worked out there could be up to 1,000 digital-only games that are going to disappear completely when Nintendo closes the 3DS and Wii U stores. And the first question I have is, are there backups of these titles that we can basically purchase from somewhere else? Will Nintendo open up its stores and say, hey, we're not going to sell these titles. If you want to buy them from here? Because that would make marketing sense. Nintendo could continue to sell games without having to use their eShop and offload the pressure and responsibility onto somebody that they trust or a company that they trust. That would work. People will go for that. But right now, there is no middle ground. It's either open or closed, here or gone completely forever. And that is the bit that stinks the most. It just seems like companies like Nintendo, even though they're so hardline against piracy, kind of leave it as the only option for certain people who simply cannot afford to buy new games and exist solely on playing older, cheaper games on older, cheaper consoles. It's an entire part of the market that is becoming more and more prominent as times get harder, as the cost of gas and electric increases exponentially, as the cost of petrol increases exponentially. Video games are becoming the luxury that they were before. And developers and publishers have to understand we don't have the money to pay for your overpriced products anymore. If I have the option between buying a brand new game for 70 quid or going back and paying £5 for a digital-only copy of a game that I can play on my 3DS or my Wii U or something like that and having several hours of fun with that game, I'm going to pay the £5. And it's not because I don't like the new games and I don't want to support developers. It's because my finances will only stretch so far. That is the thought that goes through a lot of people's minds when they look at these things. So, yes, video games preservation is a huge thing for the video games industry, but it's becoming even more prominent for the consumer because we are entering very, very tough times. Get that through your heads, executives. Start making smart decisions that actually appeal to the consumer. You're supposed to be good at business. My God. Speaking of good at business, Valve have publishing the CAD files that allow players and users to 3D print their own Steam Deck shells at home. In a post to Steam, the publisher has said, "Hello, good news for all the tinkerers, modders, accessory manufacturers, or folks who just want to 3D print a Steam Deck to see how it feels. Today, we're making the CAD files for the external shell surface topology of Steam Deck available for download under a Creative Commons license. This includes an STP model, STL model, and drawings for reference. We're looking forward to seeing what the community creates." You know, that is just amazing. Given that the Steam Deck is a modular, repairable handheld console and that they made it open source so other manufacturers could make their own, this is one of those moves by Steam that really gets the community on their side. They really understand what the community wants, and they deliver it. Now, I'm not saying that they're doing it out of the goodness of their own heart. Hell no. They're doing it to make money. We all know that. But it's really nice that they can make money while making the community happy. Are you seeing this, EA, Ubisoft, Team 17, all of the rest of you? Make money while making the community happy. It's not rocket science. Like I said, you're supposed to be good at business, Nintendo. Keep the community happy. Make money. They go hand in hand. On the subject of things that go hand in hand, Horizon Zero Dawn and Horizon Forbidden West have very strong ecological themes. And because of that, Sony have basically decided that their marketing campaign is going to adopt a more ecological tone, which I actually do approve of. I know that marketing is one of those skeevy things that you don't really want to talk about because marketers in general, in the words of Bill Hicks, are the spawn of Satan. I should know, I used to be one of them. But Sony have taken that and made it kind of positive and palatable, which I really like. Sony are planting trees for players of Horizon Forbidden West. It's part of the Play and Plant initiative. They're going to plant a tree for every player who receives the Reached the Dawn trophy in the game, which is a trophy that you can get very early on. And they're doing this in partnership with the Arbor Day Foundation. They're going to contribute to the reforestation of several projects in the US, Douglas County Forest, Sheepfire Private Lands, and Torreya State Park. They reckon that it's going to take about 288,000 trees to complete each reforestation project, but with the estimated sales of Horizon Forbidden West, seems like that's going to be an achievable goal. That's not the only thing that Sony is doing though. They're working with other ecological projects around the world to promote Horizon Forbidden West. In the UK, the Eden Project's Biomes Dome down in Cornwall is going to be lit up to reflect Aloy's shield wing, and a 12-acre wildflower habitat will be planted in Morecambe in Lancashire. Okay, so now it's time for some adaptations. And in light of the success of the first Sonic movie, we had a second Sonic movie that was announced, which is going to feature Knuckles, played by Idris Elba. Now, I reckon that's going to be a really popular film as well, and I don't seem to be the only person thinking like that, because Paramount Pictures and Sega have announced a third Sonic the Hedgehog film and a live-action TV series, which is planned for Paramount Plus, is going to focus on Knuckles, who's also going to continue to be played by Idris Elba, and I'm not sure what to make of this, because the second movie isn't out yet, and yes, I do think it's going to be popular. I think the third movie will be popular, but you're making a big, massive Sonic universe on Paramount Plus. Is it really worth it to put all your eggs in one basket, even though that basket is Sonic the Hedgehog? I don't know. It just seems maybe the law of diminishing returns may begin to apply to this, because I do remember a time when there were just so many Sonic titles flooding the Sega games consoles. You couldn't move for them. And because of just the sheer amount of Sonic titles, Sonic was no longer a special character. I just don't want that to happen now that Sonic has regained a degree of the popularity that the character had before. Moving on to Netflix, who are, well, making a Bioshock movie. Yeah, you heard that. Netflix have announced plans to make a Bioshock movie, and I'm really curious how they're going to do that, because other companies have wanted to make a Bioshock movie. It's one of those games that everybody thinks would make a great movie, but then when you say to them, how would you make it? They go, sure. Let me get back to you. And that seems to be the case ever since Bioshock first came out. I'm curious how they're going to do this, because one of the underlying things in Bioshock was the whole would you kindly thing, and I don't know, is that going to transition well into a TV series or a movie? Is the message of that going to come across as strong, or is it just going to turn into another run and gun action movie? Yeah, looking at you, Doom. Is it going to be a movie like that? I certainly hope not. Staying on the adaptation bandwagon, the director of Uncharted, Ruben Fleischer, has announced that he's in the process of adapting another game. Now, Uncharted has been getting panned by the box office, even though some people who've gone to see it have said it's a fun movie. And I get the feeling it's one of those movies that would have been a more fun movie if it didn't have the name Uncharted attached to it. But what is this game that Ruben Fleischer really, really, really wants to make into a movie? You have all these Sony titles to choose from. What are you going to make into a movie? Well, it's kind of obvious. It's got to be Jak and Daxter. Ahead of so many other titles that I could name, Jak and Daxter is getting an adaptation for film and TV. And that's not to say that Jak and Daxter wasn't a good franchise, because it was. I quite liked Jak and Daxter when it first came out. The Precursor Legacy was a great game. I liked Jak 2 and I liked Jak 3. I didn't so much mind the PSP Daxter game. Jak X was alright, I suppose, but then it fell off the radar. didn't have the staying power of things like Ratchet and Clank or Spyro or Crash Bandicoot or anything like that. But still, it was a fun jaunt through a fantasy science fiction world. That's fine. But it's not something that I would automatically slate for an adaptation. There are other games out there that are potentially more worthy or just would make the transition better. And I think you have to factor those two things in. Still, I'm curious what they're going to do. Is it going to be live action? Is it going to be animation? Please, please, please let it be animation and not live action. I really, really don't want to see a live action Daxter. And now that I'd say that out loud, that just sounds really wrong. Anyway, Mihoyo are launching a cross-media brand Hoyoverse, which still, no matter how many times I say it, does not sound right at all. The studio that's created Genshin Impact wants to create a virtual world that integrates games, anime, and other diverse types of entertainment. I honestly don't know how to take this. Everybody wants to jump onto the metaverse transmedia bandwagon. Everybody wants to create their own in-game universe that links all of their products to one thing. Everybody wants to do it. And I'm like, well, just leave it alone. You already have crossovers in your games. Unless you're going to have access to all of your games from one single central hub, which is going to be the Hoyoverse, and then anyone can play any of the Mihoyo games. If you're going to do it like that, it might be worth it. Right, that's the end of today's episode. Let me know what you think of the things that we've covered in the comments below. I'll be back next time with more choice cuts from the world of video gaming news. Until then, thanks for watching.